Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Investigators release a preliminary report into the Air India plane crash. We'll have all the details. Donald Trump surveys the damage in central Texas, where devastating flooding left at least 120 people dead. And the US sends more weapons and air defenses to Ukraine as President Trump teases the announcement of what he calls a major statement on Russia. Helena Humphrey, good to have you with us. The preliminary report into last month's deadly plane crash in the Indian city of Ahmedabad has been released, with attention firmly focused on the actions of the pilots. Now, all but one of the 242 people on board died when the plane, which was bound for London, crashed less than a minute after taking off on the 12th of June. Now, the report focuses on what was happening here in the cockpit and what happened to the fuel control switches. The report says that flight record data shows that both switches, which are normally used to turn the engines on or off when on the ground, were moved from the run to the cut-off position shortly after takeoff, and this caused both engines to lose thrust. It says that one of the pilots is heard asking the other why he did the cut-off, and the other pilot responded that he hadn't. The report said at this stage of the investigation, no safety recommendations have been issued for either the Boeing aircraft or for its engine manufacturers. And in a statement, Air India says that the airline stands in solidarity with the families, as well as those affected by the accident, and continues to fully cooperate with the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau as their investigation progresses. Well, here's the latest on the report with our correspondent, Archana Shukla.
At the start of it, pointing that this is a preliminary report. So these are just some of the facts that the investigators have gathered so far over the last 30 days post the crash, and all of that has been listed in this report. There are no conclusions drawn as yet, but the report does indicate that it was the fuel control switches that were turned off and that, after the plane took off, which would have caused the plane to lose thrust and eventually sink to the ground. What we do understand is that, these fuel control switches, there are two of them, and they're mostly turned on and they're mostly used when the plane is already on ground. So before the plane starts and after the plane has already landed and the engine is being switched off. But when what we understand from this investigative preliminary report is that both the switches, fuel control switches, were moved from the run to the cutoff position, immediately cutting off the fuel supply and turning the engines down. While it is yet not clear whether it was a technical issue or a mistake, an immediate cutoff of fuel to the engine would turn it down and it would suddenly take the plane and make it to sink, and which is what happened. It started losing thrust. But seconds later, the report also points out that they were turned on, both the engines, one after the other, but the second engine could not gain the thrust that it would need to continue flying, and that possibly led to the airplane crashing that killed 260 people, 41 on board and 19 on ground in a devastating crash.
President Donald Trump surveyed damage in central Texas today after deadly flash flooding killed more than 120 people across the state. Now, the hardest hit Kerr County absorbed the brunt of the devastation. 95 people were killed there, including some 36 children, many of who were attending summer camp. More than 170 people are still missing. And in the aftermath of the floods, officials are facing increasing scrutiny over whether enough was done to alert residents of the danger. And the disaster has sparked questions about whether the Trump administration's cuts to federal agencies and staffing issues affected preparations and the subsequent response. Well, our North America correspondent Nomi Iqbal sent this report from Kerr County.
The president touched down to see the devastation for himself, meeting officials and emergency crews responding to the disaster.
So all across the country, Americans' hearts are shattered. I had to be here as president. First Lady wanted to be here. All the beautiful souls. And we're filled with grief and devastation. The loss of life.
The catastrophic floods hit this county while most people were sleeping, making their impact all the more devastating.
Destruction like this trails for dozens of miles along the Guadalupe River. And as people try and pick up the pieces of their lives, there is renewed scrutiny on the Trump administration's cuts to the federal workforce.
When questioned about this, the president lashed out.
Only a bad person would ask a question like that, to be honest with you. I don't know who you are, but only a very evil person would ask a question like that. I think this has been heroism. This has been incredible, really, the job you've all done. It's easy to sit back and say, oh, what could have happened here or there, you know.
In the meantime, the search for victims continues.
As much of the area as we can walk along this ledge.
Teams recovering lost items.
No name.
And using highly trained cadaver dogs to find the missing.
These people could be under 6 foot of new dirt that's come down from the water. They could be under these brush piles. They could be in these little cypress trees, create root caverns.
Elsewhere along the river, horses and mules are joining the search.
We got to help them. We got to get closer to these folks, and if we can do that, then the families that are here need it.
I think a lot of us, we have the willpower to keep going, even though certain things we might see. We can kind of push through that.
They found this flag near the all-girls Camp Mystic, from where some are still missing. People here want help, and for a man who has made his mantra America First, they hope Mr. Trump will deliver. Nomi Iqbal, BBC News, Kerr County, Texas.
As the community continues to recover from the tragedy, I spoke to Kelly Rayburn to hear the stories of her sons who survived the flooding. Now, I understand that your sons, they were just 5 minutes from Camp Mystic. One of your sons, Brock, he's 7 years old, I understand. He had to hide in the rafters while flood water broke apart his cabin. Utterly terrifying. Just talk us through what happened.
Well, the morning of July 4th, I'd received a text message from the camp sent out to all parents saying that they had sustained some, floods overnight, but everyone was fine and they would update us later. I didn't think too much about it in that exact moment, but then a few hours later, there was another message saying, look, we have no phones, no power, no Wi-Fi. Please know that your child is safe. We'll update when we can. And that concerned me. And then at that time, I found the information about Camp Mystic and the statement that they had put out saying that for the girls who had not been found, that those parents had been notified. And at that point, I realized I better put my stuff in the car and start driving. I was 4 hours away from the camp. My oldest son, Braden, who is 9, had attended, this would have been his 3rd year attending the camp, and he loves it so, so much. He was going to be there for an entire month this year. Brock, he just finished kindergarten and he was going to be there for 2 weeks. This was his first session. So as I'm driving as fast as I can, of course, all of the worst thoughts are racing through my mind while just praying that my boys are okay. Then I get a few more text messages from the camp over that time period saying, awaiting a National Guard food and water drop. And a message like that is something that you would never expect to happen when just, 2 days before I'd said bye to my kids as they hopped on a bus to go to summer camp. So Brock, Brock had actually been in the lowest lying, closest cabin to the river. And it was kind of a pod of 3 cabins in one. And so those cabins took on a massive amount of water. And it wouldn't be until really I'm still learning information, but, at least a day later that I learned that, he had actually had to move from his lower bunk to the top bunk to then the rafters with the help of the brave counselors who themselves are just children, 16, 17, 18 years old. And to just imagine my little boy, my kindergartner, being in that situation as the cabin starts to fall apart around him, it is terrifying as a parent.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that, and your son, of course, and any of parents and everyone who has gone through that. How is he doing now after that ordeal?
You know, he's doing well. He is still processing. I can tell you that night when we were reunited and I asked him, buddy, what happened? He said, I don't know. I don't remember. And it wasn't until the next morning that he started to remember some pieces. And since then, now we're at 1 week, he started to remember a bit more here and there. And, you know, the details are harrowing. My oldest son, Braden, he was in a higher elevated cabin. And so his cabin actually took on some of those campers who had been flooded out. But he had no idea for that entire day. So we're talking 13, 15 hours at least, where his brother was, if he was okay. So that was quite traumatic for him too.
And Kelly, all of this has motivated you to join support calls for the Extreme Weather Survivors Group, connecting with others. I mean, what do you think that says that such a community like that now exists?
Well, it's a huge blessing to be able to have, even if I'm just listening. I tuned into a call, gosh, my days are blending together, but last night or the night before, and it was very cathartic to be able to hear from other parents who have survived these, you know, horrific incidents, from fires to floods, and a variety of natural disasters. And there was even one woman on the call who actually lived across the river from the camp that my boys were at. And she had shared that they were able to hear the boys screaming through the storm, and that it was comforting to her in that moment to know that she was hearing their voices. And then in that moment, it was comforting for me to hear from someone who was nearly at the same place as my boys were at the time.
The Israeli military is facing widespread condemnation after killing at least 15 people, including 10 children, who were queuing for nutritional supplements. The Israel Defense Forces said that the strike on Thursday in Deir el-Bala was targeting a militant, and it said that it regrets any harm to civilians. Well, our correspondent Nick Beek has this latest report on the aftermath of that attack, and a warning that it does contain distressing images from the very outset.
In Gaza, a little boy guards his sister's body, heaped among the victims of an Israeli strike. No dignity in death here. The Israelis said they targeted a Hamas fighter. But you can see, just meters away, a group of women and children who were waiting for aid. 10 children were among those killed. Bodies scattered all along the street. Among the victims, 9-year-old Omar and his brother Amir, just 5. Today, our team in Gaza found their grieving family. Memories of the boys on their phones, but little else.
Every day they talk about a ceasefire, but where is it? They had dreams just like any other child in the world. If you gave them a small toy, they'd be so happy. They were just kids, children.
The United Nations says it has deep concerns about the number of civilians being killed trying to get aid, particularly at sites run by the new US-Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF.
This is nearly 800 people who have been killed while trying to access aid. Mostly the injuries are gunshot injuries.
The Israeli army denies its soldiers deliberately shoot at people receiving aid. It says it's learned lessons after reviewing recent incidents. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation accused the UN of using false and misleading statistics. At Gaza's largest functioning hospital, doctors are now warning of an imminent disaster because of a critical shortage of fuel. Corpses can't be buried because Israeli troops are operating in the nearby cemetery. And there's no sign of a ceasefire. For many, it's too late anyway. Nick Beake, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza stopped admitting patients on Friday amid a fuel crisis and a nearby Israeli ground offensive. My colleague Katrina Perry has been speaking with Christos Georgalas, a surgeon who worked at Nasser Hospital and remains in contact with colleagues there.
You are still in touch with your colleagues at the Nasser Hospital. What have they told you about the current situation there?
Yes, I was actually talking with them just yesterday, and the situation has deteriorated significantly over the last month and a half. I left Nasser on the 21st of May. It's now the 11th of July. So over the last month, they have lost a lot of weight because there is no aid that is coming to the doctors, to the people to the healthcare staff in Nasser Hospital. And also the hospital itself is under siege. What they told me is that all the area around Nasser Hospital has been declared a military zone, so it had to be evacuated. My colleagues themselves, they're all staying now in Al-Mawasi camp. They had to leave their houses in Khan Yunis. But the IDF tanks are just 500 meters from the hospital, and they are worried that any time now, the IDF may attack the hospital. And you know, this happened a year and a half ago, and there are the mass graves outside the hospital were filled with patients and doctors. So as you understand, they're quite wary of a repeat of the same situation. However, they're still in their places, and no one has left their jobs. Everyone is still working, and they are trying to prepare themselves for the worst.
Is it an option to evacuate that hospital, given the sick patients, given that it is the only functioning hospital left in the area?
Exactly. No, I mean, obviously there is no such option. You know, I'm Greek, and we have Hippocrates, and Hippocrates' oath makes certain that you have to, above all, think of the welfare, of the good of your patients. So for a doctor to abandon his or her patients would be the ultimate betrayal of his profession. So none of my colleagues is thinking of leaving the hospitals. They're all prepared to stay there, whatever that means. Of course, they know that it's the last fully functioning hospital in the whole of Gaza Strip. So, no, I'm sure they told me, actually, and I know that knowing them, that they will stay there. They're not prepared to leave.
Given the IDF presence so close to the hospital, as you've described there, they've had to stop receiving injured people and patients at this moment. What does that mean now for the people in Gaza?
It means basically that the patients that are targeted, and they told me about this, we discussed about this, that a lot of their patients are children, they are young patients that have been targeted while trying to get aid at the so-called humanitarian aid centers, which is anything but humanitarian. There are tens of casualties every day that are coming from these centers. And most of them cannot even reach the hospital, so they may have to die or they try to get care somewhere else, but the situation is really tragic. And they're telling me themselves, the doctors, that they have to choose between dying from hunger or dying while trying to get aid at the humanitarian centers. And having said that, keep in mind that there are only 3 of them in the whole of Gaza Strip, which means that for the vulnerable parts of the population, they may have to walk for 10 or 15 kilometers, which is impossible, of course, for someone who's very young, for a child, or for an elderly person.
President Zelensky of Ukraine said on Friday that US aid shipments have resumed to the country following a pause by Pentagon officials without the apparent knowledge of US President Donald Trump. Well, President Trump has said that he will send weapons, including Patriot air defense systems, to Ukraine. And he told NBC News that we're going to be sending Patriots to NATO, and then NATO will distribute that, adding that NATO would pay for the weapons. Well, Patriot batteries detect and intercept oncoming missiles and drones, and they're regarded as one of the world's best air defense systems. President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked for some 10 Patriot systems following a surge in Russian attacks in recent weeks. Well, over the past day, a maternity hospital, as well as a dental clinic and a stable full of horses, have all been hit by Russian strikes. And Kharkiv's maternity ward director said that a drone caused heavy damage to delivery and operating rooms. Mothers of newborns described feeling terrified.
We woke up and heard a very loud whistle. My husband and I got up and rushed to our little one, and at that moment there was a hit and the window shattered. It was very scary because I was so full of adrenaline that I probably forgot that I had stitches. Now I'm slowly recovering from the shock.
Well, there's been no statement from Russia denying or justifying the attack. Elsewhere, 9 people were injured in a drone attack on the southern city of Odessa, far from the front line. And that attack also damaged a horse refuge, killing 1 horse, injuring several others. The owner left inconsolable.
I invested my whole life in this. We sheltered old horses. Some came from meat processing plants, some from sports, some from bad owners. Camila, the children really loved her. She was the star of the city.
Well, Ambassador Oksana Makarova, Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, spoke to the BBC about the recent talks on Ukraine's recovery and defence that took place in Rome.
The recovery conferences that we have, again, while defending Ukraine is, of course, priority number 1, but it's very important that our friends and colleagues together, and US was a part of that, coming together for this recovery gatherings to coordinate these particular discussions. We had about 10 billion worth of specific investment and partnership deals that have been signed there, but also to remind everyone that Ukraine is not just a country in war. Ukraine is an answer to so many global challenges. Even now during the war, we feed 400 million people. Even now, our energy system is part of the European energy grid and is very important. Even now, during the war, especially during the war, our innovations in defense tech and defense production is something that can make all of us stronger together, us, US, European partners. So it is a very important gathering where we can meet, discuss, coordinate, and ultimately move faster in those investment partnerships that are very important also, not only to win the war, but to win the peace.
Well, let's turn now to some other important news around the world. Ecuadorian drug lord Adolfo Macias, alias Fito, has agreed to extradition to the United States to face drug and weapons charges. A leader of the Los Choneros gang, he is serving a long sentence in Ecuador and was recaptured last month after a high-profile prison escape in 2023. Well, US prosecutors want to try him in New York for allegedly smuggling drugs and guns between Ecuador and the US. The Kurdish group that has waged war against the Turkish state for 4 decades has begun destroying its weapons, signalling an historic end to its insurgency. At a ceremony across the border in Iraq, 30 men and women of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, laid their guns in a pit before it was set ablaze. The PKK says that it will now use democratic means to pursue minority Kurdish rights. The American singer Chris Brown has pleaded not guilty to further charges following an alleged assault at a London nightclub 2 years ago. The musician denied causing actual bodily harm to a music producer and having an offensive weapon. The singer already pleaded not guilty to a more serious count of attempting to cause grievous bodily harm last month, and his trial is due to take place in October. Well, a mystery interstellar object spotted by astronomers last week could be the oldest comet ever seen. That's according to scientists. It is only the 3rd time that we've detected an object that has come from beyond our solar system. And here's our science correspondent, Georgina Ranard.
This is the first we saw of it, a mysterious interstellar object, just the third ever detected from beyond our solar system. It was discovered only last week, and astronomers raced to identify it. Now they think they have.
This means that 3A is almost certainly the oldest comet we have ever seen, by about 4 billion years.
Scientists revealed these striking findings about the oldest comet at the Royal Astronomical Society today in Durham.
The discovery is really exciting. The Sun and the solar system and the Earth only formed about 4.5 billion years ago. So it could easily be twice as old as the planet we're stood on, the sun that's shining on me now, and every single other comet that we've seen so far.
The comet, which is that tiny speck moving through a sea of stars, is as far away from Earth as Jupiter. It probably came from an area of the Milky Way called the Thick Disk, which is full of ancient stars. Its orbit is the red dotted line, and it is probably full of water ice.
That ice should, like in many comets, leave a blazing tail of vapour and dust, visible from Earth later this year. And as a new telescope opens in Chile to survey the skies for 10 years, we expect to find many, many more of these remarkable visitors.
Bye for now.